Members who are joining remotely must be visible on screen for the purpose of identity verification, establishing and maintaining quorum, participating in the proceeding, and voting. Those members must continue to use the software platform's video while in attendance unless they experience connectivity issues or other technical problems that render them unable to participate on camera. If a member experiences technical difficulties, they should contact the committee staff for assistance. Video of members' participation will be broadcast into the room via the television and internet feeds. Members participating remotely must seek recognition verbally, and they are asked to mute their microphones when they are not speaking. Members who are participating remotely are reminded to keep the software platform's video function on the entire time they attend the proceeding. Members may leave and rejoin the proceeding. If members depart for a short while, for reasons other than joining a different proceeding, they should leave the video function on. If members will be absent for a significant period or depart to join a different proceeding, they should exit the software platform entirely and then rejoin it if they return. Members may use the software platform's chat feature to communicate with staff regarding technical or logistical support issues only. Finally, I have designated a committee staff member to, if necessary, mute unrecognized members' microphones to cancel any inadvertent background noise that may disrupt the proceedings. Good morning. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. Dr. Deborah Rosenblum, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Threats. Dr. John Plum, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy. Vice Admiral Colin Green, Deputy Commander, U.S. Special Operations Command, and Dr. Rice, I apologize if I said that incorrectly, Williams, Acting Director, Defense Threat Reduction Agency. We appreciate your leadership and service to the nation at this critical time in global security. The erosion of international norms regarding the use of chemical and biological weapons, coupled with emerging technology that creates the ability to weaponize synthetic drugs, require us to think about weapons of mass destruction in new ways. While the United States is in full compliance with its obligations under both the Biological Weapons Convention and the Chemical Weapons Convention, Russia and North Korea, according to the Department of the State's 2021 compliance report, both maintain offensive biological weapons programs, and both have used such weapons against political opponents with near impunity. Vladimir Putin uses WMDs and the threat of WMDs to inflict terror on populations, as is happening right now in Ukraine and Europe. Russia is spreading dangerous disinformation, which falsely claims the U.S. is secretly developing biological weapons in a Ukrainian laboratory. This effort appears to be part of Putin's plan to keep the door open to employing Russia's own illegal biological or chemical weapons in Ukraine through a false flag operation. Today, I'm interested in our witnesses assessing how the fundamental changes to the security environment in Europe are altering how we think about and plan to deter, detect, and mitigate threats from WMDs, and to what extent this planning is reflected in DoD's budget requests. I'm also interested in hearing about the progress towards the destruction of the remaining stockpile of lethal chemical agents and munitions as required by the Chemical Weapons Convention deadline, September 30th, and the congressionally mandated deadline of December 31st. I know the Department has been working tirelessly to ensure those obligations are met. Dr. Rosenblum and Dr. Plum, I understand you are co-leading the first ever Biodefense Posture Review. I appreciate the critical work you're doing in this area and look forward to hearing how the review is proceeding. Finally, it's essential that we understand how all this connects to the budget requests. I'm pleased to see healthy increases across this portfolio, especially the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which, contrary to Putin's false propaganda, has been instrumental in dismantling weapons of mass destruction, and the Chemical and Biological Defense Program, with investments in vaccines and therapeutics. I look forward to the discussion and will now recognize Ranking Member Kelly for his opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your opening remarks and your leadership in organizing this morning's posture hearing. Today we will hear from 4 experts across the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction portfolio. And I want to thank each of you personally for meeting with me earlier this week and in-depth briefings, some in the SCIF, some open source, but I really appreciate that, and I think it will really facilitate this hearing. Yeah. I'm eager to get an update on the progress of the Assembled Chemical Weapon Alternative Program, especially the activities at the Pueblo Chemical Agent Destruction Pilot Plant. The subcommittee is keenly interested in the certification of the static detonation chamber and ensuring the activities stay on schedule. With regards to the threat environment, I look forward to getting an update on the capabilities of our adversaries, to include the usual bad actors of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, as well as the various terrorist organizations and networks. The ongoing Russian aggression in Ukraine continues to cause worry about the use of WMDs in the region, especially looking at their past history and some of the false flag operations that they've conducted recently and in the past. Finally, I continue to be concerned about how the Biden administration's budget will affect our overall counter weapons mass destruction preparedness. The ongoing use and threat of these weapons illuminate the direness of this problem. Failing to properly invest in these resources will have great consequences. I want to thank our witnesses in advance for their time today. I look forward to continuing the work with our Counter WMD experts during the 117th Congress to ensure we are appropriately postured to meet and defeat the threats shaped by weapons of mass destruction. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Kelly. We will now hear from witnesses, then move to the question and answer period. Dr. Rosenblum, you are now recognized.
Privilege you very much. Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it is truly a privilege to testify before you today on behalf of the Department of Defense. As the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biologic Defense Programs, I am responsible, in close coordination with my fellow witnesses, for ensuring that the United States maintains its enduring technical advantages when countering weapons of mass destruction. In recent years, our adversaries have demonstrated the potential for chemical and biological weapons to achieve a broad range of effects, from small-scale assassinations to large population-scale effect. These offensive tools could also weaken and displace defensive forces, thereby allowing adversaries to seize infrastructure, territory, or achieve a strategic advantage against the United States and our allies. At the same time, different sciences and technologies are converging to create revolutionary capabilities with transformative benefits to our society, but it also opens the door to the potential nefarious uses. This is uniquely true for chemical and biological threats. For example, engineered biologic weapons could be designed to evade our existing physical and medical defenses by making subtle changes. As a result, our deterrent and defensive postures must prepare for and respond to a broad spectrum of biological threats, whether naturally occurring, accidental, or deliberate. We can no longer rely on a static list of traditional agents to develop countermeasures against. Furthermore, the Department cannot presume that we will be able to provide the warfighter advanced warning or accurate pinpoint biological and chemical agent detection. Faced with these challenges, we must change the way we do business by strengthening the Department's defensive capabilities through bolder acquisition approaches while also using our inherent science and technology advantages. The Department seeks to modernize and strengthen the U.S. deterrent and defensive capabilities to ensure the joint force can fight and win in WMD contested environments. As the Department proposes a significant increase in chemical and defensive biological defense across the FIDUP, I'd like to share 3 examples of how the Department will seek to deliver novel capabilities for the warfighter. First, because emerging biologic threats can circumvent traditional concepts of detection, we need to change the paradigm by integrating all available sensors and data collection as a network of networks to identify changes within the environment rather than waiting for the onset of symptoms in our warfighter. Second, we must explore the concept of defending from within through preventive and post-exposure medical countermeasures. Third, we are working to enhance protection while reducing the burden to our warfighter by replacing heavy, bulky, and extremely hot individual protective equipment with novel types of materials and responsive technologies to create a next-generation protection. As I testify today about our adversaries' chemical weapons capabilities, I'm proud to report we have destroyed 98% of chemical agents from the United States chemical weapons stockpile, and we are on track to complete the destruction of the entire United States legacy chemical weapons stockpile by the planned completion date of September 2023. On behalf of the Department, I would like to thank each of you for your continued partnership and support to strengthen our WMD deterrence and defensive capabilities. The threat we face today cannot be understated. I look forward to answering your questions in the later session. Thank you.
And now, I'd like to hear from Dr. Plum.
Thank you, Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, members of the subcommittee. I, too, am honored to testify on the Department of Defense's Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction efforts today. The Department's CWMD mission is to dissuade, deter, and when necessary, defeat actors of concern who threaten or use weapons of mass destruction against the U.S. and our interests. Mission success requires the expertise and collaboration across many DoD components, close coordination within the interagency and Congress, and strong international alliances and partnerships. Today, Russia's unlawful invasion of Ukraine underscores the importance of the CWMD mission. In a period of just a few weeks, we have seen the threat of nuclear weapons use. We have seen attacks on Ukrainian nuclear power plants, and we have seen an extensive Russian disinformation campaign on chemical and biological weapons development in Ukraine. Pure lies. That is most likely a troubling pretext for possible Russian use of these weapons themselves. The DoD leverages its unique tools and expertise in support of a whole-of-government approach to mitigate the risk of global WMD proliferation and adversary pursuit of these advancements. Examples include supporting global norms under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, remaining postured to conduct WMD interdictions and preparing our partners to do so, and implementing UN sanctions to impede illicit North Korean trade. The Department's Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, which has evolved over the past 3 decades and works with more than 30 partner nations, is an important and proven tool to reduce the risk of WMD-related threats and prevent proliferation across the CBRN spectrum. And I'd like to thank Congress and this subcommittee in particular for its continued support of the CTR program. This support has paid dividends to the U.S. and global security for over 30 years, and there's more to be done. I'm pleased to note that the President's budget request for the CTR program is $342 million for fiscal year 23. The Department continues to strengthen the capability of the Joint Force and our allies and partners to operate in chemical, biological, radiological, or nuclear and contaminated environments. We strive for increased interoperability, and we encourage our partners and allies to share the collective burden of CBRN defense. But CBRN defense requires resources. And that's why the Department is seeking $630 million across the FYDP to help bolster EUCOM's CBRN defense capabilities and equipment. Now, interestingly, and I think a point worth making is this budget request originated before Russia invaded Ukraine. But that crisis further highlights that EUCOM CBRN defense is a priority and we have to address it. Making investments to counter a shifting threat environment requires sound policy, and sound policy requires an understanding of where things stand. So the Department, myself and Assistant Secretary Rosenblum, are undertaking our first ever biodefense posture review this year. This review will guide our biodefense-related activities and investments to support force protection, research and development, capability acquisition, and the required DoD expertise across the spectrum of biological threats. And this year, the Department will also begin refreshing our CWMD strategy. That strategy will be informed by the Bioposture Review, as well as the National Defense Strategy, Secretary of Defense's guidance, and our assessment of the shifting threat environment. So thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, for your continued support of the Department's CWMD mission, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, and now recognize Vice Admiral Green.
Yeah, good morning, Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the United States Special Operations Command today. On behalf of General Clark, it is my privilege to join Dr. John Plum, Ms. Deborah Rosenblum, and Dr. Reese Williams at this hearing, and look forward to discussing how we work together to address some of the most critical national security challenges facing our country, our allies, and our partners. Weapons of mass destruction are a complex trans-regional problem that continues to present a direct threat to U.S. and allied interest and requires the application of specialized expertise and authorities across the whole of government. I welcome discussion related to U.S. SOCOM's role as a Defense Department's coordinating authority for Counter WMD, the unique challenges we face, the work we've done against both current and future WMD threats, and our priorities for the coming year. Over the past year, in concert with our partners within the Department and across the interagency, we contributed to the development of the National Defense and National Military Strategies, enhanced joint force resiliency through an implementation of WMD-focused ready assessments, improved global exercise and training by incorporating realistic nuclear, chemical, and biological threats into scenarios, and improved integration and information sharing with the interagency as well as our allies and partners. However, as Dr. Plum and Ms. Rosenblum said, Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine and the potential use of weapons of mass destruction demands a sense of urgency in making deterrent and defensive investments. To that end, next year, in coordination with our partners in OSD, the Joint Staff, and the interagency, we will continue to advance joint force readiness, produce actionable CWMD assessments, and make recommendations for improvement where needed. We will ensure the Department's plans address evolving WMD threats. We will continue to accelerate information sharing through close coordination with the intelligence community, and we will coordinate CWMD equities into globally integrated operations activities and investments. General Clark and I would like to thank the members of this subcommittee for their support of this urgent national security priority. It is a privilege to work together with our colleagues to keep our country and allies safe from the threat of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. We look forward to our continued collaboration with them, with members of Congress, with our interagency and international partners to ensure our safety and readiness now and into the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we have Dr. Williams.
Chairman Gallego, Ranking Member Kelly, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify today. This committee and its members have long provided outstanding support to the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, also known as DTRA. And I look forward to offering you an update on our vital work in countering and deterring weapons of mass destruction and emerging threats. On behalf of the over 2,200 military and civilians, I'm proud to appear today alongside Ms. Deborah Rosenblum, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense Programs, Dr. John Plum, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, and Vice Admiral Green, Deputy Commander, U.S. Special Operations Command. There are few greater challenges to U.S. national interest than those posed by weapons of mass destruction and emerging threats. DTRA takes pride in providing the technological, the operational, and intellectual capacity within the department to meet these challenges. Our world-class workforce and unparalleled professional network, access, and credibility give us an unmatched advantage in enabling the Department of Defense, the U.S. government, and international partners to detect, deter, and defeat weapons of mass destruction and emerging threats in all theaters. As both a defense agency and a combat support agency and the principal counter weapons of mass destruction organization within the Defense Department, we serve as the linchpin between the department's counter WMD strategies and its practitioners. Through Ms. Rosenblum and Dr. Plum and their subordinate components, the agency receives guidance, priorities, and oversight in the areas of nuclear matters, chemical and biological defense, threat reduction, and arms control. At the same time, we support U.S. Special Operations Command role as the coordinating authority for counter weapons of mass destruction and work very closely with Vice Admiral Green's staff as well as those of the other combatant commands, providing strategic, operational, and tactical planning and expertise, as well as embedded support in material and non-material counter weapons of mass destruction solutions. These dual roles provide a synergy that is key to the successful execution of our counter WMD mission and supports the National Defense Strategy's vision of integrated deterrence. The work that we plan, program, and execute on behalf of the department and its stakeholders ensures a safe, secure, reliable, and effective nuclear deterrent, enables the joint force allies and partners to compete and win against adversaries. The National Defense Strategy highlights both of these lines of effort as key enablers for integrated deterrence. DTRA is postured and ready to support Secretary Austin's goal of developing, combining, and coordinating the Department's strengths to maximum effect. In pursuit of this goal, we play a key role across the counter-WMD community. So on behalf of DTRA's dedicated workforce, I thank you for your continued support of our critical work in safeguarding the lives and the interests of the U.S., our allies, and our partners abroad. Thank you for your time today and the invitation to participate, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for the construction back. I'm assuming it is contractors and not the Russians trying to drill in to listen to what's happening here. Dr. Rosenblum, we're going to move to our question period. Dr. Rosenblum, we can start with you and then move to anyone else who would like to comment. Russia's misinformation, disinformation campaigns have touched on all three main categories of WMD, biological, chemical, and nuclear. How do we frame our efforts in ways that account for the likelihood that Russia will probably continue this behavior?
Thank you, Chairman, for that question. The Department remains very concerned about the ability to get accurate and transparent information out to the U.S. public as well as certainly our allies and the rest of the world. So one of the things that the Department has been doing, and this is particularly related to the public health laboratories in Ukraine that is being tragically used by the Russians as a potential for a false flag operation. From the White House on down through the Department of Defense, as well as Department of States, as well as all of the vehicles that we have to be able to communicate accurate information out about this and the work that has been underway. I can say to you unequivocally, there are no offensive biologic weapons in the Ukraine laboratories that the United States has been involved with.
Without a doubt. Anyone else want to take a question or a crack at that? Well, moving on then. Dr. Williams, the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program has unique authorities, like commingling funds from other nations for urgent threat reduction needs. Is CTR exercising these authorities actively, and can you share any recent examples?
Thank you for that question, sir. Yes, sir. As you noted, the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program does have unique authorities within Title 50 specifically. We do commingle funds that come in from other organizations. As a matter of fact, a recent amount of funding has come in from the United Kingdom for work in these particular areas. We have a very active program, as was said earlier, in over 30 countries. Last year alone, we had 70 engagements across the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program, across all areas of responsibility in the combatant commands, closely coordinated, obviously, with Dr. Plum and his office, where we receive those policy determinations on where to work within the agency. So, sir, it's a very active program, and it's one that, as Dr. Plum said, has paid incredible dividends over the 30 years that we've been working with this program. As a matter of fact, this year we celebrated the 30th anniversary. It was a major milestone for the program. Thank you for the question, sir.
And to follow up, DTRA is focused on countering, deterring weapons of mass destruction. I'm interested in hearing about the more advanced capabilities in countering and detecting chemical and biological threats, and specifically actions you have taken to support what is happening in Ukraine. And obviously, if some of that has to stay on during the classified briefing, we could do that, but anything that can be shared publicly also be good to know.
Thank you for that question, sir. The agency is the science and technology portion of the Chemical and Biological Defense Program that's operated under Ms. Rosenblum's authorities as the Assistant Secretary for Nuclear, Chemical, and Biological Defense. We work very closely also with the Army's Joint Program Executive Office for Chemical and Biological Defense to provide cutting-edge capabilities for the Joint Force, as well as in close coordination with our partners and allies as well. Everything from leading-edge detectors, capabilities to weave together new data in new ways. As Ms. Rosenblum said, data is a place where we can spend a considerable amount of time in terms of activities. And in terms of our activities in support of U.S. European Command, sir, in terms of those activities, we've had almost 200 requests for support from not only European Command, but across the DoD and interagency. So as you know, we run the 24/7, 365 technical reach-back capability that does modeling across the chem-bio nuclear spectrum. And because of that, we've been asked questions that range from if something was to happen to a Ukrainian nuclear power plant, where would the plume go? and across the board. It's something we actively are monitoring now, sir, and I'm happy to answer a few more specifics in the closed session.
Thank you, Doctor. I now yield to Ranking Member Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the department balances the shift in resources between counter, VEO, and great power competition, what are the most significant capability or resource and vulnerabilities to the Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction mission? Any of y'all can take that, and then if anybody needs to follow, you can.
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for the question. So as a coordinating authority, U.S. SOCOM establishes collaborative forums to get after, to understand the threat, identify gaps, and make recommendations. So to your point, I think much like any state or non-state actor, these pathways, understanding the pathways and understanding what runs through them, whether it's transnational organized crime, counterterrorism, or CWMD, I think we've got to collectively leverage our access and placement, our authorities across the interagency as well as DoD, but more importantly, our allies and partners to understand the threat left to bang. So I think we're doing that well with regard to how we understand the threat. I'd also say that the Secretary rightfully directed that we integrate CWMD into planning, resourcing, modernizing, and then more importantly, training and exercising holistically. It's not just about money, it's about the holistic effort to get after it.
And I just hoping to follow up, if there's any gaps or vulnerabilities in either resources or funding, I hope that y'all will feel, and I understand we probably can't answer those, and I think Dr. Rosenblum, you were gonna say something.
Yes, thank you very much, Ranking Member. What I was going to add, and I think we can get into much greater detail on the classified side of it, but from a looking at closing the gaps that we have across the WMD spectrum and the investments, the main thing that we are pivoting from is concerns that it would be a non-state actor who would be using this to then really looking at state-based threats and the depth of the science and technology that they have available to them, and we can get into greater detail in terms of the specificity, but that is a dramatic pivot from a threat perspective.
Thank you. And then in the PB submissions, the presidential budget submissions for FY21 and 22, the department drastically cut funds to the Cooperative Threat Reduction Program. Each time Congress has reinstated this fund, why is it important, Dr. Rosenblum, to fully fund this program?
The Cooperative Threat Program provides and plays a critical role in ensuring that our allies and partners who we will operate on any kind of joint battlefield has capabilities that are commensurate with those of the United States so that we can work with them seamlessly. And that goes kind of a range of gamuts of things that we are doing throughout the world. But that's fundamentally the key purpose of that program and why it remains so vital to us. And as my colleague, Dr. Plum, and I'll ask him to elaborate on this, mentioned that in the FY23 request that there is a significant increase in that as the administration recognizes the importance of this program.
Thank you. And you answered my question. I just want to make sure we understand the importance of fully funding that and even the increase. Given the increased use of chemical weapons in Syria and the asymmetric use of nerve agents by North Korea and Russia, what can we do to deter further use of chemical or biological weapons? What are we doing to ensure that the international norms against the use of these weapons is not eroded? And what can we do to develop new standards to deal with the emerging chemical and biological threats? And that's for any of you.
Thanks, Congressman Kelly. It's an important question, and I think the crisis in Ukraine and the blatant threats really by Russia of potential use of chemical and biological weapons is opening everyone's eyes to how much of a problem this is. The deterrence issue is a challenge for this administration. I think the fact that the White House has used the megaphone of the United States of America to call this out is an important deterrent, right? I think we've been able to, and it's not just the administration, it's obviously working with the Congress too, but rally the entire NATO alliance to kind of align against this is useful. There's always this question of who is, at least in the case of Russia, who is Putin really trying to communicate to? If he's trying to communicate with us, that's one thing. If he's trying to communicate with his own people, that's a different problem. So we have this communication conflict that we really need to work on. On a readiness side, there is some argument to be made that better readiness and better training, as the Admiral spoke to, helps deter. I don't personally believe it is, it's necessary but not sufficient. But the more ready we are to engage in a zone like that, then perhaps the higher the threshold is for its use.
And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several questions, but I know they're going to have to be answered later. So I will ask them anyway to use my 5 minutes. No, because maybe there's a clue. First off, for Admiral, for Admiral, as we look at strategic competition and this issue of WMD and the role of SOF, are there specific areas where your coordinating authorities are needing to change, or are there specific roles that you are seeking to change within the special operations community to meet that strategic competition WMD response?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think this is a wake-up call with regard to CWMD, much like CT was. So I think the coordinating authority and the work that we've done here with my colleagues to recognize this threat, to plan for it, like I said, to modernize, and then to train and exercise, frankly, is what, it's a holistic approach. But from a special operations perspective, we bring capabilities to understand that threat, but also, so do the interagency, so do our allies and partners. So I think it's all hands on deck type of approach to understand this threat. It's a whole of population, it's a whole of government. I know those are cliches, but I really believe that this threat is serious enough, and I think this fora with the coordinating authority has brought recognition to it, and with money and again those other facets of how you get after it are critical. But I do believe special operations provides unique capabilities, but it can't be only a military understanding piece. There's a role for, again, allies and partners.
Yeah. Well, on that point, and this might be for later, but for any of you, what role will U.S. forces play in NATO's recent CBRN defense element that was activated in EUCOM? Can anyone answer that here? Okay, I'll go ask Dr. Rosenblum. I'm sorry, I'm making a mistake. I've 22 years. I know I have to ask a specific question to a specific.
No, absolutely. I'd like to take that one for the record to get back to you.
Okay. All right. Can you get back to me by noon?
Sure.
Okay, got it. Yeah, Dr. Plum, I'm on the aviation subcommittee as well, and so we're tangentially involved in this discussion about debris management, because we regulate the airspace from the ground until a rocket gets to space, and then it gets into space. And I noted in preparation, I think in your confirmation hearing, you had some discussion with SASC about the traffic debris management issue. Can you update us on where that is now, and is it a drag? Right, because it's not resolved yet.
Thanks, Congressman. In the SASC hearing on that, I was asked about Office of Space Commerce and the need to. So this is outside of FAA. This is actually a commerce piece. Obviously, FAA has on the way up and down,
Right?
Which is also important. But the budget request is on the order of, I want to say somewhere around 85 to 88 million, which is the right number. I had confirmed that since, so I think that funding off space commerce at the right amount is going to give them that chance to get up to speed, because you really have to fund not just an office, but you got to get folks trained, you got to get the software going, and so there's, I think, a 3-year plan to kind of get it up and running, and I think we're where we need to be, which was not true last year. So I think this is it's a good news story.
Okay, and that's good to know. Again, as you said, what goes up does in fact sometimes come down, and
Very often.
and the FAA needs to clear the airspace if it's coming down in places that.
Yes, and I think just to pull on that for a second, I do know there's more work to be done on that as well, and I think there's some regulation space for that we could talk about offline if you'd like.
Yeah, sure. Okay, great. I'm going to end there, and I'll yield back the remainder of my time and call on Mr. Scott. Recognize Mr. Scott. He's off. Then who'd be next on the other side? Representative Bacon for 5 minutes.
It's always good to be ready. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all 4 of you for being here today. I have 5 questions, so if I can't get through them, I hope I can get something on the second round here. But my first question is to the Honorable Ms. Rosenblum. How would you say our strategy or doctrine has to change with 2 near-peer powers with nuclear weapons? We're used to 1 major power, now we're headed the direction of 2. How do you see this changing our doctrine and strategy?
So on that question, Mr. Congressman, I would like to take that more in the classified section. There is something that the nuclear posture review that I know has been released to Congress on a classified basis goes into that. Happy to answer that question on that, but it certainly is something publicly that we have spoken about that is going to require the level of refinement and change to the strategy and to the doctrine, because the rate of escalation, the rate at which the Chinese are moving ahead with the modernization of their nuclear program is dramatic and unprecedented, and particularly across all legs of the triad, and will require a rethinking on that.
Instead of playing a 2-person chess game, now we have 3 people playing chess on the same board.
Understood.
It changes it. Dr. Williams, a quick question for you. How would having the Open Skies aircraft made an impact to DITRA and to our U.S. military leading up to Ukraine and after?
Sir, I would say that the Open Skies process was one that was useful for the U.S. That said, obviously the administration made the determination to end that. DITRA was the execution agency for the Open Skies mission, sir, and we are following the administration's priorities.
Understood, but would it have provided some useful information leading up to the invasion of Ukraine?
I would just say, sir, all information is useful.
Thank you. It would be my position that it cost us not having this airframe leading up to the invasion, and I think we could have used it after the invasion as well. Back to Ms. Rosenblum, would you say the administration is fully committed to a full recap of the triad?
Yes, Mr. Congressman, I can answer that in open session. It is absolutely committed to the recapitalization of the triad, as well as the nuclear command and control that goes with that, along with the Department of Energy infrastructure and all of their facilities that are required to make all of the warheads associated with the modernization.
That's great news, and I think you'll have bipartisan support on that. I heard yesterday this week from a COCOM commander saying there was a need for low-yield nuclear weapons, or that it gave the commanders more options. As you know, Russia's invested heavily in this area, and they have the escalate to de-escalate strategy. What's the administration's position on low-yield nuclear weapons?
If it's all right, Congressman, I'll take
Sure.
that. So, first of all, I'm aware of the comments you're referencing. I will say the W76.
If you could just get closer to the mic.
I'm sorry. Is that better, Congressman?
Yes, sir.
Better, thanks.
Okay. The W76 TAC 2, which is a low-yield warhead for a submarine-launched ballistic missile, remains deployed. So, and that program continues. And so, from a deterrent standpoint of the ability to posture with a low-yield weapon, I think that covers that particular question. There is, of course, just cards on the table, the SLICM-N, the submarine-launched cruise missile, which would be a tactical nuclear weapon by definition. That has been zeroed out, And I think reasonable people can disagree if this is a thing that we should continue or not. But the modernization of the entire triad is firmly cemented in the budget and the NPR, and the continuation of W76 TAC 2 as well.
Thank you. I'll just close with a comment. It was something I had the honor of talking about yesterday. We started about a 2-year process to do a surge capacity for a pandemic bioweapons, have the surge capacity in the United States, and the military or the DoD in partnership with Health and Human Services picked 5 sites, Omaha being one. It would be my request that the department continue to fund this, put it in their budget requests. The community is looking forward to partnering with DoD and HHS on this effort. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
Representative Sherrill.
Thank you. As the coordinating authority, Admiral Green, what recommendations are you providing to the Secretary of Defense regarding best modernizing the department's ability to prepare and respond to the current threat, given Russia's previous use of chemical weapons in Syria and the threat of chemical weapons use and biological weapons use in Ukraine?
Yeah, thanks, Congresswoman, for the question. So I think my boss submits an annual assessment to the SecDef through the chairman, and the 2 things that he cited were we needed to aggressively increase our capability and capacity to counter WMD, and that we needed to prevent a strategic surprise, which was to focus cooperatively on understanding the intel threat. But with regard to modernization, I think we've got to leverage the authorities that you gave us, the Small Business Innovation Research, other transactional authorities, and middle-tier acquisition to get after and partner with industry on things that can improve and modernize not only personal protective equipment, but detection and monitoring. And I think, as Mr. Rosenblum mentioned, we're getting after that. But I do believe we need to address that. We need to leverage those authorities a little bit more aggressively, and again, and partner with industry on how we increase capability and capacity.
Thank you. And we spoke briefly about the CWMD Senior Leader Seminars that you are conducting with combatant commanders, and also about the effectiveness of such seminars with preparing combatant commanders to address WMD threats from great power competitors in each theater. Are there common significant gaps that these seminars have identified across multiple combatant commands? And in your opinion, how can the department modernize its WMD threat posture, and what steps can Congress take to move these modernization efforts along?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And I think the most significant thing that this panel did in the last year is these senior leader seminars. We had one for EUCOM in February of 21, and we just had one for Indo-PACOM with Admiral Aquilina, and they were well attended by my colleagues here as well as the interagency and our partners and allies. And I think that the key piece of those senior leader seminars was it war-gamed the vulnerabilities that we may have with regard to our plans, our resourcing, and frankly, again, our training and exercises. So I think those were invaluable, an invaluable product of of these stakeholders here that you have before you today, and we'll continue to do those. Specifically, the EUCOM one was done a year ago, and fortuitously, that has prepared us better for what we're dealing with today currently. And EUCOM implemented an implementation plan to get after some of the things that they needed to do, that they did do from then to now, with regard to those broader 5 things that I talked about that make us better postured today. But the SLS is a great venue that the coordinating authority and again my panel members have implemented. Thank you.
Thank you, and I look forward to getting into some more details in the closed session. With that, I yield back.
Representative Franklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate our witnesses being here today. As a former naval aviator that spent more time than I care to remember in MOP gear, and now here in Congress reading about the threat and understanding how significant it is, I used to always just, the value in those exercises to me was just praying to God that it never happened. But you all don't have that luxury. You've got to deal with it, and it's a very real threat that I fear too often is backburnered. It doesn't get the attention it needs, and I know that's not the only things that you have on your plates, but it's vitally important. And if it ever happens, it'll probably be one of the worst things that's ever happened to the United States. But I do have a couple of questions, and Admiral Green, you and I have had some conversations about the authorities and helping me understand how all of this shakes out, because it's a very complex problem set. But I understand SOCOM's coordinating authority on the front end. I am curious, though, who would be the coordinating authority in the event, in an actual event, after the fact?
Well, a coordinating authority does not command, it doesn't convene, it recommends. So
I understand. On
combatant-
your end, it's preparation of, coordinating the operational plans. It's helping with the strategies. But if all of that fails and we find ourselves with an actual event, who is then responsible? Because it seems very complex to me as to who takes charge then.
Yeah, I would say simply it's the combatant commanders. I mean, they execute the campaigning day in and day out, and they own the contingency plans and the O plans. As we speak, General Walters owns the UCOM AOR. So this venue, the coordinating authority, simply tries to support an understanding of the threat, identifying resourcing gaps, and then making recommendations across policy and force provider issues. But ultimately, it's the combatant commanders.
Okay. So if we had a contaminated environment, obviously the COCOM's going to have to execute the battle plan and keep going forward. But how do we go about, who coordinates the mitigation efforts to allow them to continue to move forward? And whoever might want to answer that. It's just, I have a hard time understanding how it unfolds after the fact.
So that would be done actually on the ground operationally. By the joint force, right there. So if you were to have a contaminated environment on, say, a logistics or a flow-through base that the United States or its allies were using, and were they to be contaminated, the forces immediately there on the base would be dealing with decontaminate. I apologize, that area and the equipment in order for the force to be able to continue to proceed with its mission.
Okay. We saw with great success, I think, during this COVID pandemic, with Operation Warp Speed, what DoD collaboration with DHS has been able to do. I'm interested to know, what lessons we've learned from that, how we're going to perpetuate that going forward so that we can be prepared for future things. And then also, as we deal with adversaries like Russia and China, where companies are either state-owned or at least sponsored, and there's that collaborative effort just by the design of how their governments function. They're working together in a lot of cross-purpose type technologies. How are we, and how could we better work with not only our other government agencies like DHS, but on the civilian side with our pharmaceutical companies, with our biomedical research? What are we doing to get better at that?
Thanks, Congressman. On the first part of your question about how the pandemic has given us some lessons learned, I think on the highest level, the takeaway is the department can't afford to think about biothreats as a nation-state battlefield weapon, and has to include pandemic preparedness as well as specific agent design preparedness. And so the bioposture review that we're undertaking, biodefense posture review, is looking at this from a whole spectrum to include that part. And I think that's a big lesson that we've all, I don't know if it's learned or relearned.
Yeah, what I would just add to that, Congressman, is on the research, development, and acquisition side. One of the things that we are beginning to pivot away from is the focus on a singular agent, but rather the reality is that we are going to have more broad spectrum kinds of both drugs as well as vaccines. And our continuous consultation, certainly with the pharmaceutical industry, is helping us with that. And I can go into further detail in the closed session as well.
Great, thank you. And I yield back.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you to everyone for being here with us. Look forward to the closed session as well. But I'll just start with Admiral Green. Can you talk a little bit about how you're leveraging American innovation and small businesses to help assist in the mission of countering weapons of mass destruction, and what particular tools have enabled you to leverage that innovation and work with small businesses?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I mentioned, and thanks for the conversation in your office. I mentioned we have leveraged those authorities, I think, more effectively in the CT world, in the counterterrorism world, and they're there, and we need to aggressively work with industry and leverage those authorities when it comes to this problem set. I would say that we have done some work with personal protective equipment that I can get into more detail in a classified session, but that is one example of where I think we have worked with industry to increase our capability and to harden our operators. I think, Ms. Rosenblum, I think another area where I think has a lot of promise is we've had an outside-in approach to protecting the operator, and I think she mentioned a little bit of an inside-out where we can protect with proven and tested pharmaceuticals to protect the operator. But I think those are areas where we can advance as well. But I acknowledge that we've got to get a little bit more aggressive with the authorities that you've given us and to seek modernization in partnership with industry.
If I may, Congresswoman, just to add that working with small business is a very high priority for the administration, and we are very aware of the barriers to entry that presents, and this is an area that we are trying to focus on, how to make it what the demand signal is from the department better understood by small business, and ways to more effectively integrate them into the advances that we're making to modernize against against the whole WMD landscape.
Great, thank you for that. Admiral Green, I know that pathway defeat or collecting intelligence on the supply chains used to develop and move WMDs is a critical part of SOCOM's CWMD mission. Are the ISR capabilities you need for successful pathway defeat sufficient? Are there specific deficits that we could address? And do you have the authorities you need to collect the necessary intelligence to complete your mission?
Yeah, again, thanks for that question, and I appreciate the dialogue I had in your office because I've thought about it since we had that discussion. I think there's never enough ISR, but I think we've got to look at ISR, and my boss, frankly, he's looking at next generation ISR, and it involves open source data, space, and cyber, and we may need to move away from reluctance on iron and airframes, but I think we've got to get creative. But I also think our allies and partners, they need to harden themselves, and us including with regard to research that our near-peer competitors do, whether it's intellectual rights or whether it's supply chains. So I think ISR is a broad term, but I think we all play a part, and our allies and partners really can help with that. And we had a Five Eyes session in the last SLS, which was extremely productive to listen to their thoughts and how we may be able to share intelligence better with them so that we have a global look at this.
And maybe if Ms. Rosenblum, you can follow up on that and talk a little bit about how you're coordinating with allies and partners on both understanding and countering WMD threats.
Yeah, thank you very much, Congresswoman, for that follow-up. In the research, development, and acquisition area, we have a number of bilateral working groups that we have, particularly with the Canadians, the UK, as well as Australia, to not only understand where they are with their science and technology and as well as advanced development programs, but also where some of their areas of concern are so that we are able to address that from a procurement, material, medical countermeasures approach.
Thank you very much, and I yield back.
Representative Lamborn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Rosenblum, I'm going to ask you in a minute about the Wuhan Virological Institute in China, but first let me quote 3 sentences from your written statement. The Department of State's April 2021 compliance report voiced grave concerns about China, Iran, North Korea, and Russia's compliance with the Biological Weapons and Toxins Convention. The report assessed that both North Korea and Russia have offensive biological weapons programs. Additionally, the activities of China and Iran raise concerns about compliance. Chinese publications have described biology and biotechnology as a new domain of warfare and cite the aspiration to make China the world leader in genetic engineering, precision medicine, and brain sciences, among other scientific disciplines. So we've heard so much from different directions about the Wuhan Virological Institute. Was that any part of the Chinese effort, as you quote, to become preeminent in what they view as a possible new domain of warfare, biology and biotechnology?
Yeah, thank you very much, Congressman, for that question. My statement was oriented on their approach much more broadly than what they may or may not be doing in Wuhan Institute. They have a premier biotechnology economy that they are continuing to grow openly and commercially with investments both in the United States as well as globally. So my comments were not restricted just to what may or may not be going on in Wuhan.
Okay. To drill down on that just a little bit more, though, I've heard reports that they were engaged in gain-of-function research, which to me, I don't see any good that can come out of that. It takes viruses and makes them more transmissible or more deadly. Do you have any view on or comment on that?
With respect to whether gain-of-function research, which I'm in general very familiar with in terms of its role in vaccines, related to Wuhan, I'd want to take that as a question for the record. One other thing that I would like to explore is that there have been some concerns or questions about whether DITRA funding or other funding at the Department of Defense was used in support of the Wuhan Institute. And we took a hard look at that, and to my knowledge, there was no DoD funding provided to Wuhan Institute.
Okay, I'm glad to clarify that. And lastly, are you involved in any other research concerning the possible connection of the origins of COVID to the Wuhan Virological Institute?
I am not.
Okay. Admiral Green, I'd like to ask you a question on a different subject. As you know, the administration has decided to cancel and defund the nuclear capabilities, including the SLICM-N and the B-83. Do you agree with that decision? Do you think that that was in accordance with your best military advice?
I will ask one of my colleagues to potentially comment on that. I'm not familiar. I can take it for the record.
Okay. Okay, I guess in SOCOM, maybe that wasn't your, I mean, these are Navy, one of those is a Navy program, but I thought with your SOCOM role, you may or may not have familiarity with that. So with that, given the fact that you've said that, I won't pursue any more on that issue. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Well, thank you very much. Votes are about to be called right now, or at least in the next 10 minutes. So what I propose, unless there is any other questions, is that we close this formal session and then we restart in the classified session after votes are called. Excellent. Thank you, and thank you to the witnesses.